spending these 3 hours with you. Okay.
Thank you, Leanne. And what could, in a way, from our point of view, what could be more fascinating as a topic than to talk about trauma, but to put it in the context of attachment? Because for us in EFIT, attachment is our map to human beings, how we develop, how we grow, how we get stuck, how we get blocked, how we end up depressed, anxious, and with post-traumatic stress. And, you know, attachment really gives us a map to human emotion, human needs, human fears. So we're talking about trauma, and we're putting it firmly, as we always do, because we're obsessed with attachment. Because for me as a therapist, attachment is the map that never lets me down in therapy. When I'm saying to myself, what on earth is happening with this person? How on earth would they get to where they are? I always find the answer in attachment science. So what could be more interesting than this topic? I think it's a totally fascinating topic. I mean, in lots of ways, we're really talking about complex PTSD here. But I think in general, we're also talking about the nature of trauma and what exacerbates and keeps trauma going, and what is the basic way of healing trauma. So do you want to, it's lovely to work with you as always, Leanne. Thank you, we're a great team. So would you like to just go over what we think participants will be able to do? It's in their handouts, by the way. The main things we're going to talk about are always in your handout. So do you want to just touch on that?
Sure, exactly. So you do have some handouts. We're not going to follow them, logically necessarily, but
no, we never do, because we just start to chat. Yes.
Yeah. But we do invite you to reference them. And in terms of our overall goals, we want to introduce you to the model, to EFIT, to attachment theory and trauma, how we make sense of the impacts of trauma, how we make sense of key others in either quelling those impacts or amplifying them. That's central to our topic today, working with attachment injuries and understanding attachment injuries, and putting those in the context of understanding our clients' stories. We will talk about EFIT, some of the key interventions, the 3 stages, the goals. We'll talk about how we tune in and find focus with our clients very, very briefly. We don't have very much time today. And we'll talk about how we work through the 3-stage process in EFIT. Each of us is going to share a story that has inspired us and hope inspire you as well. And we'll each also share a clip of a client that we've worked with. Both of these clients, in fact, are featured in EFIT level 2 that will be launched at some point in the near future through PESI. And so I don't know, Sue, do you want to start with your story, or would you like me to?
Well, yes, let's start with stories. When I was sitting thinking about this event this morning, I was remembering working with a policeman who was the crack shot in the police force in my town. He was kind of a hero. He was he was known as the one that was able to deal with anything, cool, under pressure, etc. So he and his buddy were called out to a farm where a farmer had somehow lost his cool and had started firing at people and ranting. So they went out there and they tried to intervene, and the farmer started shooting at them. And the client that was seen at my clinic, they decided they had to take a shot, right? They tried to shoot him in the shoulder, and my client took the shot and missed. And the farmer killed his buddy. So I want you to imagine that policeman, who is not a child, is not as vulnerable. We're going to talk about childhood trauma a lot, but this policeman is not a child. He's a fully functioning adult. he's got a career, he's got a wife. And so I want you to imagine that what he imagines is that he will go home and he will be able to weep and have his wife hold him and reassure him and tell him that this doesn't mean that he's a terrible person, that he's a complete failure, that all the things that are going through his head, right, that this doesn't mean these things. Unfortunately, what happens is him and his wife have been having some problems, and she has been caught in telling him how he fails to meet her expectations and how he basically doesn't show up when people need him the most. And unfortunately, he goes home after hours of questioning by his colleagues and the police, and he walks in and she says, so you missed. And now Jim is dead. And I want you to think about the impact of that, because that's really what we're going to be talking about here. This is an adult man, right, who's had lots of relationships and resources. This man, that response we are suggesting to you has a lot to do with the reason why when he comes into our clinic 6 months later, he is having terrible PTSD flashbacks and is when somebody knocks on his front door, he finds that he is hiding behind his in his basement behind his furnace and shaking, right? Because at a moment of complete vulnerability, what the basic message is, what he found was that there was no solution to that vulnerability in the most basic place that we look for a solution, which is the arms of other people, that he was alone. And that what he heard indeed was that his wife agreed with his most terrible judgments of himself, right? So I want you to get the impact of that. Now I would like you to translate it to a place of even more vulnerability, which is the young woman that you're going to see me work with after our very tiny short break where people can go and get a drink or something. Alison, I want you to translate it there, where Alison was sexually abused by her brothers constantly from the time of about 7 to the time of about 13. And she was told by her brothers if she told anyone, they would hurt her. But the bottom line, she didn't tell anyone. And the reason she didn't tell anyone is she says, I suffered in silence because I knew that if I told anyone in my family would fall apart. I knew that my father would attack my brothers, hurt my brothers, maybe he'd go to jail. I knew, and some people say, I knew no one would believe me, etc., etc. But I knew, so I had to protect my family. So I suffered in silence. Imagine this child suffering in silence. So unfortunately, she always had this fantasy that her father would protect her. And that fantasy, I think, was a resource for her, and he didn't know, so whatever. But unfortunately, he found out through a devious path when she was a little older. And unfortunately, he said, oh, that is just a set of childhood mistakes. That's no big deal. That's just childhood mistakes. What we need to do is basically just go on. We need to basically say, pretend this never happened, and we'll just go on. And him and the rest of the family have done this. They do things like they invite Alison to come back to the other side of the country. She's fled to this side of the country. They invite her to go to weddings and to things, and she's only able to send them an email saying, I'm not coming. Or when I get married, you're not coming. But they just continue to act like nothing has happened. So I want you to notice that that is even more devastating. because for us, there is a profound survival, significant attachment injury there, delivered by the people that she at least held in her mind as a source of protection. And she felt that she mattered to these people, her parents. And then what she discovers is, no, indeed, her pain is irrelevant. I want you to taste what I just said. She discovers that to the most important people in her life, her pain is irrelevant. And this really, really, I just want you to think about the impact of that. We'll talk about it more. First of all, it completely destroys her trust in other people, and it completely destroys her ability to reach for other people, etc., etc. So this is what it does.
And she hears that as I am irrelevant.
Thank you. She hears that as I am irrelevant. So this is profound, and it prevents healing. The miracle is that this young woman somehow found a partner who sounds like the most amazing partner, who actually sort of saw her and saw her pain in her family and reached for her continually. And she tells me she does have some trust for him, but of course, when she's really vulnerable, she shuts him out. Of course she does. And we'll talk about why she does that. So that's my story. And we'll look at Alison later. And I think you're going to start with the story too, aren't you?
Yes, lovely. Yeah. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do this is to invite you into this topic, of course, but also provide an anchor for some of the content and material that we're going to be discussing. So the person I'm going to introduce you to, you'll meet later in this program. Her name's Selena. I met her a few years ago following a significant health scare and what she described as yet another chance at life. She had been clean and sober, to use her words, for about 4 years, and she'd also recently undergone and recovered from a liver transplant. She described many encounters with mental health professionals over the years, a host of diagnostic labels, many of the classics that we're all familiar with, BPD, OCD, manic depressive disorder, and so on and so forth. But she said, in her words, no real solutions and no benefit. At one point in the process, she proclaimed, people labeled me, but they never heard me. They never listened to me. And from an attachment EFIT point of view, that's powerful for us. And that tells me something very early on about trust and the importance of the therapeutic alliance, which is, of course, always key, but how attentive and deliberate I need to be in working with this individual who's not had a good experience in the world on a variety of levels, including with mental health professionals. So in EFIT, we endeavor to not only hear our clients and see them in context in which they have lived and live, including their intergenerational context, but we want to actually enter their worlds, get a visceral sense of the worlds that they live in and have lived in. And we're especially interested in their relational worlds, as Sue's been describing. So to cite Irvin Yalom, we want to get to know the key characters that live in our clients' minds, those who've had a positive influence, been resources for resilience, and those who have posed danger or threat or not been there for our clients during a time of need. In short, what we want to assert and make clear throughout our program today is that key others can either quell the impacts of trauma, they can be the sources of that trauma, and or they can amplify those impacts. And we're going to come back to some of these key points over and over and over again in this 3-hour course. So join me now and get to know the world that Selena has lived in, and you're going to get to see her after the break. She tells me that she grew up on an inner city reserve in Canada, a landmass devoted to her First Nations community, but plunked in the center of the dominant white culture. At multiple levels, she did not feel seen or heard. She described some preservation of her language and culture, but mostly she describes a history of loss, trauma, and deprivation across generations. So now as we continue to walk alongside her into her childhood home, she describes it poignantly and powerfully as a quote unquote party house. She tells me about the smells that overwhelm her senses: pot, alcohol, cigarette smoke. And as she gets closer to that felt experience, the words come through her. Powerful words that we would describe as emotional handles, and we'll come back to some of these terms later. Alone, lonely, starving. And what really stands out for us from an attachment point of view is that word starving. It really captures this experience of deprivation. Early school experiences provided no refuge whatsoever. Instead, following an angry outburst, she gets sent to a psychiatrist or psychologist. She's not sure which. All she remembers is it was this older gentleman in a lab coat in a hospital setting. And that's here at age 7 that she gets her first diagnosis. And she says it again, very clearly, pronouncing each syllable carefully and deliberately: learning disabled. That is how she was labeled as a little 7-year-old girl. And as she says, so
and indeed, she was learning disabled, because if we have no secure attachment in the world and we are frantic looking for danger and vigilant all the time, we cannot learn, right? We really cannot learn if we're always looking for the tiger behind the tree. So in a way, that was kind of an accurate thing, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. And in the next moment, as she describes this whole scenario to me, to us, she says, no one considered what was going on in my home. Exactly. Or in fact, in her community, in the broader culture, and in the context in which she lived. And also around that time, her dad had an affair, and quote unquote, everyone in the community knew. And then he left, he abandoned the family, more shame, more loss. And then Selena spent the next years with her mother in a variety of schools, no sense of belonging, and no place that she could call home. Her mother continued to use substances. By mid-childhood, Selena also discovered substances as a way to numb the pain and escape the reality of her circumstances. And then now, as we return back with Selena, as she shares her story to the current context, she talks about being very, very angry with her mother. She expected more of her. In her words, she had no expectations of her dad. She gave up on him a long time ago, she tells us. When he left the family and community, she detached. She gave up hope. Her mom, on the other hand, she continued to have hope that maybe she would be there for her. And at one point in adolescence, Selena was working at a community center, which again, I think highlights, like you were suggesting earlier, Sue, with Allison, and this is part of what we want to tune into as well, is her resilience. Wow, I only have a snapshot of her story. And here she's telling me that she was working, she was going to school. Wow, where did she get her resilience? And that's a key question that we'd ask. But staying centered on the specific incident that she's describing, she tells me that she has to go to work early, and she has loaned her bicycle to someone else. So she asks her mom about the morning, and her mom assures her that absolutely, I can drive you and I'll have a lunch prepared for you. Selena sleeps in. She believes. She believed. She continued to believe. In this moment, she believed. But when she woke up to an empty fridge and an absent mom. She was infuriated, but felt a sense of responsibility to these children she worked with at the community center. And
so that injury, it's interesting that she remembers specific incidents, right? And people do remember these specific incidents of what we call attachment injuries, where they hope that this person will create some safety in the chaos and in their vulnerability, and that hope is dashed. And the impact of that dashed hope is huge. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Sue. So in a different context, this wouldn't have the same impact, but in fact, it had a huge impact on her. And by then she had learned to numb through drugs and alcohol, but also by shutting down her emotional world. But that day she cried, she sobbed, something she never, ever did. And that day, like you say, Sue, it was a key defining moment. She gave up hope. She gave up hope on her mom, and she gave up hope on ever believing she could ever rely on anybody ever again.
Right. And that cuts her off from the main resource we have as human beings in any kind of deep vulnerability, which is to turn to another and turn to the comfort of another. This is our wired in, evolutionary solution, perhaps the only safety we ever have in the world, really, which is the arms of others. And when that becomes a lie or dangerous or just totally unavailable, we really believe it's unavailable, this has huge impact on how we see our world, how we see our own vulnerability, how we see ourselves, how we see others. And it's the kind of impact that maintains trauma. It just keeps trauma and trauma responses going. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Shall I just, I'm worried a little bit that some of the folks we're talking about don't know what we mean by EFIT.
Sure,
So
yes.
I'm just going to dash into EFIT very shortly, and then we'll talk about why EFIT is particularly useful for trauma. And then I believe that you will chat a bit more about EFIT and our goals. To cut it short, our main goal in EFIT is to create a secure sense of connection with self. And that translates into being able to connect with others and to feel a sense of competence and coherence in the world, being able to put your experience together in a coherent way. So that's our main goal, but you're going to say more about that. So if you guys don't know, isn't it a lovely acronym? EFIT, we really like it. Fit for life. That's our goal, not just the reduction of symptoms, but growth. EFIT and EFT in general, which is usually seen as a couples therapy, is dedicated to growth. And from our point of view, it is your job as a therapist to believe in your client's ability to grow, no matter what symptoms they come up with or how many diagnoses. And so many of our clients have had 4 or 5, often with complex PTSD. They're called borderline. Okay. And we can look at that. I mean, it makes sense they get that diagnosis. I also don't think it's helpful most of the time. So what do we do in EFIT? EFIT is a conversation between Carl Rogers, who said therapy is about growth, and therapy is about tuning in to your client and focusing in the moment on how they construct and cannot reconstruct. Construct and cannot reconstruct their inner experience. They cannot make sense of it. It's chaos, or they cannot touch it. It's too dangerous. Bowlby said, and this fits Rogers, who never met John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, said, in the end, every client comes in with frightening, alien, unacceptable emotion. And what an EFIT therapist does is turn frightening, alien, unacceptable into normal, acceptable, tolerable, and orderable, emotion that can be ordered and made sense of and actually lead somewhere. In EFIT, we lead people into their vulnerability and out through the other side into being able to grow. So that's sort of what we do. With Rogers, who said that it's a good idea to reflect. If Rogers saw us do EFIT or EFT for couples, I think he would be shocked, because he reflected about once every 5 minutes. If you see us work, we reflect constantly. We hold up the person's experience to them in a way that they can tolerate it and begin to actually move into it and work with it and make sense of it and order it. We evoke emotion because we believe that's the royal route to change. And indeed, research tells us that it is, and that it is what organizes, emotion organizes your inner world and your relational dramas. So we go there and we use a focus on emotion and helping people find their emotional balance. And that is, we do that in a Rogerian way, okay? But also EFIT is based on the best developmental model of personality that we've ever come up with in psychology, which is attachment science. And I invite you to read our books. I invite you to read the primer that came out last year on emotionally focused individual therapy, which me and Leanne wrote together. We had incredible fun writing that book. I invite you to read the primer to understand the map that attachment offers us to who we are as human beings, how we get stuck, how we grow, what truly traumatizes us. The key thing, if you're going to focus on one thing that John Bowlby taught us over the years, what he taught us was, for human beings who are wired to be social bonding animals, isolation, true emotional isolation, is iatrogenic in and of itself. It leaves us with no choice but to numb out completely or to become hyper and watch for danger all the time, to be hypo or hyper aroused. It really leaves us with no choice. If you are in a world where you can never trust another human being, I invite you to think about that and what happens to you when uncertainty, pain, and overwhelm comes for you, which it will come for all of us in our lives. So it's based in Rogers' humanistic, non-pathologizing approach to therapy, in you attuning to your clients and dancing with them, not doing interventions to them, dancing with them. And it's based on attachment science. And I'll talk a bit more about that in terms of understanding trauma. It seems, and complex trauma, where there's been specific injuries from other people. I think you absolutely need to understand attachment to understand the nature of complex trauma. And it's also based on 35 years of crazy, passionate EFT and EFIT researchers and therapists who I can't believe I'm blown away by their complete devotion to this model, doing all kinds of studies, looking at thousands of tapes, coming up and learning from every study, and taking the concept, Rogers' concepts and Bowlby's concepts, and turning them into a map for change. The one thing I want to say to you about that is, we are a bit biased, of course, but it seems to us that EFIT is one of the few models of therapy that has a very clear way of seeing people and how they get stuck in dysfunction, and a very clear, very systematic path to creating change events that lead them out of that stuckness. We know how to do that. We know how to, in couples, it's called a softening, where the couple get together and bond and help each other grow. And in EFIT, we've started calling them emotional epiphanies, where you create a new sense of connection with self, a competent, strong sense of self. So we know how to create those events. And we know that those events from our research create change. And we know that those events, the changes that people make, last through three years of follow-up. So this is very specific. So it's also research. All right. So I'm just going to say a little bit about why we think, in general, EFIT is a good approach to use with trauma of all kinds. And we see trauma of all kinds. We work with vets, we work with first responders, we work with incest survivors, We work with all kinds of complex PTSD. Basically over the years, we've always done individual therapy for trauma. We've just never had time to talk about it because we were so busy solving the issue of what's happening in a distressed couple and how do you solve that and what is love all about. I mean, those are big things to struggle with. So we did that for 30 years. And then we thought, wait a minute, we should share the fact that we work with trauma, particularly with individuals. So first of all, we believe that EFIT is particularly useful for trauma because we know that in a very specific way, it's not just a general intellectual statement. We know how to create a safe alliance. We know that a good bond is where someone is open, attuned, listening, someone is responsive, particularly to emotion, and someone is explicitly engaged with you. So we know what a safe bond looks like, and we strive to create safe haven, secure base sessions. At this point, we're pretty good at that, I think. So we can create the safety that people need to turn and face their dragons. We focus on emotion, which is the core. Emotion dysregulation is the core issue in any kind of mental health problem. It really all boils down to that. If you have no emotional balance, you cannot even look at your problem with any kind of perspective, or you can't even tolerate it, okay? So we help people move into that emotional balance, and we're very systematic in the way we do that. We know how to, at the one time, evoke and deepen emotion, and also how to contain it. EFT is relational. We believe the research that says that the best predictor of outcome for any kind of trauma is a secure connection with another person. And sometimes that secure connection can be completely within in your head. I invite you all to think about a secure connection you've had in your life. And I invite you to think about whether you recall those moments of secure connection. I bet you do, because they're wired into your nervous system. They're part of your survival protocol. I invite you to think about secure attachment. When we talk about this, I always talk about my father and how even it has shocked me, even though I'm passionate about attachment, to actually hear his voice at times in my life when I have been off balance, good times in my life as well as negative, when sometimes we don't really know what to do with good times either. We can't quite take those in. So I invite you to think about that. It's relational. We see people in the context of their relationships. We are profoundly relational. Any approach to therapy that does not take account of the bonding aspects of people's lives, from our point of view, misses the mark. EFT is non-pathologizing. It talks about how we all get stuck and we all have trouble with vulnerability. And there are only so many ways through vulnerability. So we look at how people are stuck and we accept their stuckness. We say, of course, your response to these feelings, this fluttering in your chest, is to decide that you are a terrible person. This makes sense, doesn't it? Of course. And then we talk about how blocked they become, and they have become. So it's non-pathologizing. We find the order and logic in people's dysfunction. We have all kinds of empirical research, not just on the fact that we create change in all kinds of aspects of mental disorder, but we improve relationships in a very specific way. We have follow-up studies, and we've learned from every research study we've done. We have a focused set of interventions, and I'm going to talk to you about the tango. Please note the tango is a dance that you do with someone. You work with your client together to help your client walk through the dark valley and out into the sun to bring your client home. So I'm going to talk about tango. We have a clear map for creating what we call core emotional epiphanies that we know create change. And we're we can go in with our depth of that we can go to with emotion. We go to an existential level where, and of course, trauma goes to an existential level. That's part of it. It goes to the level of basic survival, and we're able to incorporate what Irvin Yalom talks about as the 4 key issues in existential science: issues of isolation. If I am alone, what does my life mean? What do I mean? How can I ever deal with vulnerability? It's basically aloneness creates no solution, vulnerability. We have to deal with creating meaning in our lives. Trauma victims come in and say, I'm empty, I'm numb, I've been numb for 20 years. I can't live numb. As my client Alison, that you're going to see later, said to me, I can't live numb and I don't want to feel. So then you're stuck. You're really stuck. Okay, so you can understand that. Yalom talks about choice. If you have no safety anywhere and you have no emotional balance, you can't make choices. Every choice looks like a loss. So you make the choices that look like less pain for you, which are often just straight back into your trauma responses. And there is the issue of the fact that we're all vulnerable because life passes. And we know that we are fragile and transitory. So we touch on all those. And when we work with trauma, particularly this kind of trauma, we note that people talk in life and death terms. People say things in their imagination or in couple therapy to a person in front of them. People say things like, you watched me drown. You watched me drown. And you didn't come. And that's the way it is. And I'm not going there again. I'm never, ever, ever going there again. I'm never risking. The amazing thing is they are risking with you in your office. So you reflect that and say how brave they are. But, you know, they talk about things like, I was burning and you drove away, you turned away. I want you to note that this is life and death stuff, because that is how your nervous system reacts to isolation in the face of overwhelming vulnerability. So I think I've said it all, Leanne. You're so good at reminding me, but I think I've said it all. So I'm just going to say a little tiny bit about what we call attachment injuries before Leanne goes on and talks to you about goals and stages and things. What we call an attachment injury is basically where one person, and of course it came out of our work on couples, where one person violates the basic expectation that the other will offer comfort and care at moments of danger. These moments are carved into your memory. You do not forget them, because it's all about life and death. So in our couples, we would realize that sometimes people could not heal their relationship because every time they started to trust, what would come up in them is, you would watch a couple and a woman would say, come close, come close, come close, come close, come close. I'm so alone. How can you not come close? And then the partner would turn and begin to come close. And the woman would say, go away, go away, go away, go away. Are you crazy? Do you think I'm going to let you in? And a therapist who doesn't understand attachment will say all kinds of things. This woman is borderline, whatever, whatever. But what she's doing is perfectly logical. She was reaching for belonging because that is really the only solution we have to our vulnerability. And then when it's actually offered to her, her brain remembers, no, this closeness is dangerous. You cannot go there. So she retreats. So we would watch this again and again in tapes with couples. But of course, you also see it in your individual therapy. It's an abandonment or betrayal of trust at a key moment of need. And most clients can tell you the moment. I mean, it didn't obviously just happen in a moment. You know, Leanne's client was being neglected by her mother for a long time before the moment when she actually relied on her and the mother wasn't there. I want you to notice the mother wasn't there in Leanne's story. She didn't do anything totally traumatic. The thing about attachment injuries that you don't understand, and so you can't grasp their significance if you don't understand attachment, is it is not the content of the injury. It is not, well, her mother left. Well, how traumatic is that? Well, and she left before. Why is it traumatic? It is not the content of the injury that matters. It is its significance, its survival significance, where suddenly someone gets, no one is there for me. I don't matter to anyone. And what do you do with that? Well, usually our clients do, there's something wrong with me. I'm not really human, I'm alien, I'm weird, I'm everything is terrifying, and I can't deal with anything. I'm just waiting for the next enormous catastrophe to happen, right? So it's the significance, and it really interferes with our access to the biggest healing resource we have, which is to be able to turn to other people, right? And the amazing thing is that it's literally what we see in our clients is, even if you have one relationship, or even if sometimes you have a short period where someone is there for you, your nervous system notes that, holds on to it, takes it in, and it becomes an inner resource for you, which is amazing, which is tells us something about the significance of this experience. You remember the moment that you stepped off the cliff, and you remember if there was a hand that clenched yours and helps pull you up, you remember that, you don't forget it. And that is a secure bonding moment. So often people show incredible resilience because they've just had a little bit of this, okay? And they can still somehow use that. Unfortunately, though, the pain of the injuries comes in and exacerbates any kind of neglect and trauma that this person has experienced. The only other thing I want to say is these kinds of traumas inflicted by the people we love and care for on us at moments of vulnerability have been labeled disorganizing by attachment theorists. I want you to notice that. They scramble our ability to regulate overwhelming affect. They scramble our ability to make sense. They scramble our ability to believe in ourselves and to trust our inner experience. They scramble it. They bring up images of death. The other one, I want you to think that in these situations, other people become the source of and solution to fear at the same time. That sends people crazy. That is inherently disorganizing, and people don't understand it, and often therapists don't understand it. So that's where, for me, that's where borderline comes from. You want closeness, but you can't tolerate it. Exactly. Of course. Yes. That makes sense, doesn't it? Is that dysfunctional? No. There's a logic behind it. Oh, if you understand it and can tune into it and make sense of it, that changes everything. That allows you to tune into your client, to make sense of their world, to make sense of their logic, to say, of course, right? And when they start to understand it and there's a logic, they can start to shift it. So the other person becomes the source of and solution to fear at the same time. And the clients can't organize that. So, one of the things that my client Alison talks about when she comes in, she says, oh, I have all these diagnoses. I said, okay. I said, but tell me what is happening in your life. When are the moments in your life when you say to yourself, I'm in trouble? Or, she said, well, I just become enraged. I become enraged. I said, well, when do you become enraged? Well, I don't know. I just become enraged. But when we look at it, she becomes enraged when anyone makes a demand of her. Anyone asks her for something on the phone, right? She becomes, And what sense does this make? No, it doesn't make sense. It just means I'm weird and strange. And no, it makes perfect sense. The demand she put on herself all through her childhood was to suffer in silence. That's the demand she felt. And she did it and did it and did it and did it and did it. It nearly killed her. And then she found it didn't make any difference, because when her father did find out, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. So rage is important, and we validate it. And then, of course, as you validate it, you always, once you get past the surface emotion, you go into the core emotions. And in trauma, those core emotions are shame, incredible grief and sadness. You touch what you longed for and what you never received, incredible grief and sadness, and fear. This is always going to happen to me because there's something wrong with me, etc., etc., etc. So we could say a lot more, but I want you to understand the way attachment helps us understand people's pain in a very specific way, people's fears and people's needs in a very specific way. That gives the therapist a map to their emotional world, their relational world, and how they put themselves together. Okay, I'm 3 minutes over, Leanne,
Perfect.
which is very good for me because I can talk forever. I'm 3 minutes over, so you are now going to talk more specifically about EFIT, so that when people look at the tapes after our little break, which we'll take at 11:30 for just a few minutes, people will know what they're watching. Oh, no, I'm then going to talk about tango. I forgot.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to talk about tango. And then, okay, so I'm passing it over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sue. That beautiful summary of how we make sense of our clients' stories in the context of attachment, which then guides us. And attachment provides us with a map, as Sue's been saying. So in your slides, you'll see or in your handouts, a slide of the goals of EFIT. So if we think about trauma as blocking growth and connection, what do we need to do as EFIT therapists? We need to identify those key barriers, move in and through the emotion associated with some of these key moments that have defined the self, defined our clients as feeling worthless, unlovable, unable to rely on others. And as we do that, trauma is transformed. In the sessions that you'll see us helping our clients, first of all, before they ever do this restructuring of self, which is what we describe as stage 2, we need to help them to, in a sense, to use the language of many other models, broaden their window of tolerance. We want to move them into a frightening, alien, and unacceptable emotion, as Sue was describing earlier. So stage 1 is all about stabilization. It's all about creating a safe haven alliance. It's all about broadening our clients' capacity to tune into themselves and to then begin to share that with safe others. At times, that's only us. At other times, we might be able to help them access resources. Sue described that earlier. And one of the things that our clients have taught us is that they might have resources. They might have a key other that held their hand when they jumped off the cliff. But in a sea of darkness, in a landscape of darkness, with the curtains closed on any of those positive experiences, it won't even be noticed. It won't be remembered necessarily unless we help them to discover and make sense of that. And then we can use that. So in the case of Selena, for example, she discovered that she knew her grandmother, at some sense, at a cognitive level. She understood that her grandmother was a key safe other, but she didn't understand how she had carried her in her body, and that she had been there at key moments of transition, like at her master's ceremony, when she was there on the podium, not learning disabled, but in fact resilient, and had discovered that her intellect was able to get her out of the world that she grew up in, as she described. So in stage 1 of EFIT, we want to move our clients toward greater capacity to tune into themselves and to share that with others. Our overarching goal, as Sue was describing, is essentially to bring our clients home to themselves, to secure attachment. You'll see a slide that defines that based on all kinds of studies in attachment science and in over 35 years of couple therapy research, that basically our clients can tune into themselves. If Selena's in the classroom in grade 2, barely surviving, barely hanging on, and lashes out impulsively, unknowingly, how could she ever focus on what the teacher's saying? How could she ever focus on developing pure relations? How could she didn't live in a home, in a world. We know that the sense of self is constructed and evolves in our most important relationships. And when we don't have that, of course, that growth, that development is thwarted. It is impacted negatively. So we want to move our clients toward a felt sense of security so that they can tune into themselves, share themselves with others coherently and directly, take in and receive love. And for many, many of our clients, such as those that we've been describing, who have had histories of developmental trauma, longstanding and chronic, that the latter in particular is very, very difficult. There might be a safe other who can provide that care and compassion, but I can't take it in. I don't believe it. In stage 2, that's where we by the time we reach stage 2, our clients are able to move into their core vulnerabilities in deeper ways and sustain that for longer periods. So it's there that we can really begin to reshape and restructure self and system, the way that our clients view themselves, the way that they move in the world with others, and the way that they manage emotion. And on the other side of that, oftentimes our clients will come with a host of events that we might bookmark, thinking that we'll go back to those specific events later in therapy, but we don't necessarily have to go revisit all of them. Often there's a consistent theme that underlines these moments of vulnerability when people were not there for them. Abandonment, betrayal, trauma, abuse, neglect. And as we move through stage 2 and into stage 3, it's here that we can rely on our client to then navigate some of these key relationships. For example, in the case of Selena and her mother, I don't have any specific agenda for what she might do on the other side of this therapy process in terms of navigating her relationship with her mother. I trust wholly and completely that when she can come home to herself, find her balance, be able to manage her internal emotional world, she can choose. She can decide whether she wants to work that through with her mom or whether maybe she needs to do yet another stage of grieving around.
That's a lovely point, Leanne, that she can then choose, right? She can then choose how to interact with her mother, or even if she wants to interact with her mother. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So you saw in the way that I described Selena's story that we tune in with care at the outset of therapy, and we hold on to these core dimensions throughout the process of therapy. Those are outlined in your handouts as well. Context, we pay attention to context, the context in which our clients live and have lived. Of course, is very different for me when I see a first responder who's had a horrible incident such as Sue described, and he can go home to a loved one. He has a department that he can count on, a detachment that supports him and believes in him and helps him to make sense of his experience. That's a whole different experience than going home to a loved one and some of the comments that Sue was describing with her client earlier.
Right.
We focus specifically and deliberately. Of course, we all do, regardless of what therapeutic modality we work in. But as Sue was describing earlier, in EFIT, we endeavor to have a special kind of alliance, not as experts who diagnose and inform and guide the process. Of course, we're guides in the process, but we're also listeners and companions on these journeys. So sometimes we follow our client, sometimes they lead, and especially as we move into stage 2 in this process, and our clients have greater capacity. And as I was describing with Selena, we trust that she can find her way in navigating some of these key relationships. And indeed, she does and has and will. And an emotion-focused therapy, of course, we focus on emotion. And in the primer, we talk a lot about looking past diagnosis. Of course, when Selena shares with me these host of labels, I know something about what that means. I do all kinds of assessments for insurance companies around trauma and for lawyers and for the courts. But I want to look past that at her felt experience. What does that mean for you when you talk about having dark periods? What does that look like? Help me to understand the themes in your nightmares. When do the flashbacks occur? What are the triggers? What do you do? When you get triggered, what do you do? And now we're working and moving into affect assembly and ordering her emotion, as Sue was describing earlier. And based on the world of couple therapy that we've lived in for a number of years, we have some key interventions that are tried and true. And we use the same core interventions in EFIT as we've used in couple therapy, with just a few deviations. And that Sue will talk more about when we talk about the macro intervention, the tango. But those core micro interventions are things like tracking, reflection, validation. Yesterday, we did a Q&A and someone asked us about how we use psychoeducation in EFIT. And I think we commonly use validation as our form of psychoeducation. Of course, Selena, of course, it makes perfect sense that you would shut down and lash out. What else could you do? That was the only safe thing to do when you were a little girl. There was no one to turn to. You were alone. And you notice my voice. We use risk. We stay present with our clients. We titrate our own selves as instruments in the process in a way that our clients can manage. So you'll notice when you watch an EFIT therapist as they move through the process that as they work toward deepening, they create even more of a tent to enclose that felt experience for the client. Whereas at the outset, when our clients are very likely to be triggered or threatened by any kind of emotion, it's okay to just hear their story and begin to walk into their worlds in the way that we were talking about earlier. And as they get more comfortable, as they feel safer, as we tune in and reflect and validate their experience, they too can begin to see themselves in their experience in new ways. And that provides them with increased felt sense of safety and security to begin to discover their worlds in new ways, in deeper and broader ways. And then we set up interactions. Once again, EFT is a relational model, whether we're working with individuals, couples, or families, and we make it relational. So when Selena is able to tune into her internal world, I invite her to share that with a key other, because that's where the magic is. That's the magic of EFIT, where real change takes place. And that's a challenge to her prototypical felt experience of being alone in the world and having to numb out and shut down and lash out. And we'll say more about that, and we'll provide you with more context for that before we see the 2 videos that we're going to share. And I think, Sue, you're going to talk a bit more about the tango and how we integrate these micro interventions.
Yes, thank you, Leanne. I'm suddenly aware that because this is a short program, we are giving you an awful lot. We are trying to give you the basic perspective we come from and the theory at the speed of light. So, but I know that I think you can watch this more than once. And if it is a little overwhelming, we do suggest that you look at the EFIT primer, which has lots of information, but also lots of summaries and lots of exercises in it. So let's slow down a little bit here and talk about what we do in a session. What do we do in a session? What would you watch us? What would you see me doing? Or Leanne, or any EFIT therapist? You would see us reflecting, but you would see us not always reflecting just the story that the client is giving us, or the kind of information that the client is giving us. We go past the information to the emotional relational level. You would see us reflecting the basic theme that people are coming up with, which is that they're always waiting for this terrible emotion to overwhelm them. And everything they do in their lives is an attempt to deal with that. And the way they deal with it, unfortunately, move them back into the trauma response. The prison, the protection that we create for ourselves becomes a prison. And that's common across every form of mental problem, relational problem that I've ever seen in my whole practice in the last 35 years. That way the solution we come up with for our vulnerability, unfortunately, leaves us stuck and just invites more triggers and vulnerability. So you'd see us reflect. Years ago, a client said to me, she'd been learning CBT, and she said to me, "But Sue, how many times do I reflect in a session? Do I reflect 4 times?" And I loved the question. And I remember saying, "Jessica, just do it all the time, okay?" I said, "All the time?" I said, "Yes, just do it all the time. But what we've got to talk about is what you reflect. You don't just reflect the superficial surface. You might start there because the client starts there. So you reflect where they're at. You join them where they are, right? Not where you think they should be, or but yes, you reflect, and you try to reflect the central drama that's going on in their dance with themselves and how they define themselves, in the way they deal with their emotions, in the way they connect with others, and where that leaves them. So you reflect, you make implicit explicit. And you know how to do that because you have a map called attachment science, and you validate. You validate people every chance you get. And what I try to say to people in our trainings is, by validation, I do not mean what you do at work when somebody's done a reasonable job. I don't mean, "Oh, that's jolly good, Sid. Thank you so much. Yes, jolly good." That's the restrained, maybe upper class English version of validation. And it's on a cognitive informational level, and it doesn't really work. I suggest to people, you validate the way you validate your dog. People are amazing with their dogs. They provide their dogs with such safe haven, secure attachment. Okay. And dogs know we've got this species under our thumb because they just give us everything we need. You watch people with their dogs. I used to sit at Starbucks and watch people interact with their dogs outside on the patio. Okay. And it's amazing. People's face changes, their posture changes, and they say, "Good boy. Oh, you're such a good boy. Yes, you're my special dog. Yes, yes, yes." They look into the dog's eyes. The dog explodes with joy. They keep doing it, right? And I bet you, they don't do that with their kid or their wife. And we do it with little ones. We know, we say, the mother, where a child takes a risk to go down the slide, says, "Good boy. Oh, you're so brave. You're my special little brave boy. Look at what you did. You went down the slide. Good." That's validation. And it sends a message. I see you. I see the strengths in you. I see how stuck you get, and it makes sense you're stuck. I see you. In this moment, you're important to me. I see your importance and value as a human being. This is a very powerful antidote message to most of the messages your clients have received in their family of origin, especially if they've been complex PTSD. This is a very, very powerful message. Sometimes people can't take it in. And when people block you in therapy, you stay with the block. So the client who says, no, that isn't true. What is true is that I am a completely disgusting human being. And if an EFIT therapist would say, yes, I understand. I understand that that's the place you go, and it's very hard for you to hear me say, and I'll repeat the validation 4 times. It's very hard for you to take that in. I understand, because the message you got from your family was overwhelming, that you were a failure and you were unworthy of their love. So I understand that. And as I understand it and validate how he can't hear it, of course, he begins to hear it. So we listen, we tune into your client with your curiosity. What would have to be happening to me for me to say these things? These things that obviously keep me stuck. We ask evocative questions. These are all micro interventions from Rogers. We ask evocative questions that make things specific. What happens when? How do you feel right now talking about what goes on with you? We make things specific. Human beings can deal with specific events, traumas, problems. Specific. When we understood there was a hole in the ozone layer, hey, amazing. We all got together and started to fix it. Oh, great. But now we say, oh my goodness, there's something called climate change. It's overwhelming, huge. We can't. And your client defines their life and their trauma in overwhelming, huge general terms. You make it specific. Tell me when you say these things to yourself. Tell me what you feel as you do it. Tell me how you deal with it. We make it specific, okay? We heighten certain elements of experience. Sometimes we heighten the image people carry in their mind of a secure attachment figure as a resource. Leanne goes in and helps Selena have an image of her grandmother, hear her grandmother's voice, understand the message. I invite you to all think about a moment when you had a resource, and it can be quite, I remember every detail of my grade 4 teacher's English teacher's face, dress, and her voice and the things she said to me. I remember every single one. Miss McKenna. And what she did was in front of the class where I did not belong, where I was an outsider, I was the wrong class, I spoke wrong, I dressed wrong, right? I was the wrong religion, the wrong class. This woman turned to me and said, Sue, this essay is very, very good. And I'm going to read your little essay. It was probably like 3 paragraphs, okay, to the class because it's very good. And I want everyone to appreciate how creative you were here and how you can write. How you can write. Without that moment, would I have actually written all the things I've written? I'm not sure. So I invite you to think about those resource moments. But of course, there are also moments for our clients where things fall apart. And we make them specific. We heighten that emotion. We deepen their ability to engage with it at the same time as we contain it and hold them for them. We help them understand the meaning of things. We reframe their blames in terms of stuckness and find the logic, right? And we begin to shape ways of interacting with self and other that are new and different. So those are all Rogerian approaches. You could, it's not Rogers. Rogers would, I'm not sure. I hope he would like EFIT. I think he would. But, he would also say, oh, this is different, right? Hopefully, because we've done all this research. And the way you do all these things matters. Leanne talked about risk before, and I realized that we hadn't told you what it was. Risk is our way of intervening, which is singing to the amygdala. If you want to really go into significant change, it's a waste of time from our point of view to just talk to your prefrontal cortex, your information load. It's a waste of time. The beautiful insights that we're all so proud of when we go home after a session and think, God, that was a good thing to say. But unfortunately, our client won't remember it in the next session. So our client will say, yes, that's important. And then they won't remember it. If you want to create change, you have to sing to people's amygdala. And if you're going to do that, you only can do it in a certain way. You can do the most brilliant interventions. And if you do them the way I'm talking to you now, which is I'm teaching a seminar, so I'm talking quite high, and my voice is quite high and fast. And I'm still concerned that we're overwhelming you, but I'm talking high and fast. I'm speaking to your prefrontal cortex. I want to speak to your amygdala, particularly if it's dysregulated and looking for threat everywhere. We use risk, and you have a slide. Oh, I can't see the number. 17. Repeat ourselves. If you say something that's totally strange and doesn't fit with somebody when they're in a panic, do you really expect them to listen to one message? I take ferries a lot, and the ferry man always comes on and tells you what to do if the boat starts to sink. And it's really funny because he just tells you all these things once. And I feel like, man, forget it. Go and have coffee instead. It ain't going to work. Okay. You repeat yourself, because the first time you say something like that is so painful for you, you simply, the only thing you can do is numb out. The first time you say it, the person says, no, I do not numb out. Actually, I have a deep existential awareness, and I read Nietzsche, and I go for a walk in the woods. And okay, fine. So no, it doesn't fit. Next time you say it, the amygdala says, I don't know what that was, but I'm not going to listen. Next time you say it, the amygdala says, what was that? Fourth time you say it, the amygdala says, The fifth time you say it, the amygdala says, yes, that's right. I hurt. And then I run. And your client looks at you and says, I hurt and then I run. You say, yes. So you repeat key messages. You use images. The client says, you watched me drown. You pick up that image and use it again and again. You use key images. Images put your nervous system, your body, your mind together into a whole. Images evoke emotion. Use simple words. Use the client's words. Write down what we call the client handles. Use the words they say. Write them down. Use them again and again. And if you want to reach the amygdala and work with emotion, I assure you, you have to speak the way a mother sings a lullaby to a child. You have to speak soft and slow and be specific. So if you want to reach somebody emotionally, you watch couples do it all the time. They say the right things, high and fast, but in a kind of accusatory way. You know, they say, I'm really, really hurt and I'm really lonely in this relationship and I can't find you anywhere. Yes, but listen to the way she says it. The guy says, I'm accused. I'm always accused. I'm always doing something wrong. But when she turns to him in EFT for couples and says, I can't tell you. It's too scary. I'm really hurt. I don't think you want to be with me. I don't think I'm enough for you. And I can't find you. So I yell and scream. And you're right, I yell and scream. And I know I'm pushing you away from me, but I don't know what else to do. I just yell and scream. And the therapist says, and you're trying to say, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Isn't that what's happening, Mary? Yes, you're trying to say, where are you? Where are you? I'm so alone. I can't find you. And Mary says, yes, yes, that's what I'm trying to say. And her husband weeps. Okay, so you use soft and slow, and you use the client's words. So that is all the kind of general framework for our interventions. That's kind of the general things we use. But we have actually a more specific sequence that we call the EFT tango. It's called tango because in spite of what you see on Dancing with the Stars, real tango, Argentine tango, is a huge lesson in attunement. It's standing up and attuning to a stranger anywhere in the world, in any capital, and listening to you're both listening to the same music, the same emotional music, the same pacing, and you stand up and you breathe together and you change weight together. And when you find each other and you can tune into the signals, you move to the music. And when it's pure attunement, it's pure joy. Human beings love attunement with another human being. It's what our nervous system says. Yes, 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 give me more of this. And when we have that sense of belonging, then we grow and become who we can be. Belonging, these moments of synchrony, attunement lead to growth and trusting ourselves. So what we do in a structured way, we don't do it mechanically. This is a capturing of a live process, I want you to understand. What we do in a structured way is we do the EFT tango. Move one of tango is we mirror and reflect the present process. The process, the person, how they regulate their emotion and how they relate to themselves and to others. So with Alison, she tells me all her diagnoses. She tells me she's angry and she wants to stop that. But then she starts to tell me, I'm numb, I can't live numb, and I don't want to feel. Right? And she tells me, I know my husband loves me, but I can't let him in. When I'm really upset, I shut him out, I close the door, don't talk to anyone. When my brothers call me, I just say, I don't want to see you, I'm not coming. Right? And I'm just stuck all over the place. I don't know what to do with this. So, but those are the moments that she lets me in. Mostly she just gives me information about her life, about her job, about her frustrations, about her headaches, about, her symptoms. So I start to focus on that, and I start to talk about how these difficult emotions like anger and something else she's not sure how to define, these difficult emotions and this sort of discomfort, this is what she calls it, come for her. And she's always waiting for them to come for her. And when they come for her, she decides that there's something wrong with her and that maybe her family were right. What happened to her as a child was her fault. After all, her father told her, well, why didn't she complain? Why didn't she tell him? Why didn't she come out? Why didn't she stop it? Why didn't stop it? She's a 6-year-old child being constantly raped by her brothers at night. No, why, and so she tells me how this defines herself. She tells me what her emotional life is like, and she tells me, no, I don't let other people in. And then she says, of course, and by the way, I haven't found therapy very useful. And I'm probably not going to find you very useful either. So I reflect this process and how she's stuck. And I reflect the process as the problem. That she's caught in this way of dancing with her own emotions, her own sense of defining herself and being with others. And she's caught, and it leaves her alone, constantly waiting to be overwhelmed. And she starts to look at the whole thing from we've pulled back and we've looked at her, the way she processes her experience and her life. And we've said, This is the problem. How you tune into and make sense of your experience. This is the problem. You are just a human being. And we only have so many ways of dealing with vulnerability. Actually, we only have 3 ways of dealing with vulnerability. In the end, we run and avoid. And of course, that just brings you back to where you started from. We run and avoid. We freak and act out and yell and scream and throw chairs. And I'm English working class, so I swear a lot. Okay. And people are always shocked that I swear like crazy. Okay. In these moments. So, or we stay with the emotion. We're not quite so overwhelmed, and we can turn to someone we love and say, I'm overwhelmed. I'm caught in blaming myself. And that's about it. We don't have a huge emotional repertoire. So we reflect people's inner emotional and relational lives and frame the symptoms within that reflection. That's move 1. And people experience that as very validating, very safe, and they feel heard and seen. You know, I'm used to people saying to me at the end of session 1, where I summarize their story for them, I'm used to people saying things like, you get it. I think you get it. You get it. Right. And we're using the map given to us by attachment and all these years of working with EFT. So we know where to tune in, how. The second move is we go deeper into the affect. We press the button on the elevator and we take the elevator down into affect. What is affect? What is emotion? Emotion has a structure. Relationships have a structure. The way we define ourselves have a structure. Attachment tells us what it is. If you understand the structure of something, you know which variables to change, how to tune in, and you start to understand how to change it. Right? So what is the structure of emotion? Emotion, and this is very old. It originally comes from a brilliant lady called Magda Arnold, and I've never seen anything better since. I think she wrote about it in 1960. You have a trigger, and sometimes people can't even tell you what it is. I say, I don't know, I'm just mad all the time. No, you're not just mad all the time. Okay, let's talk about the last time that you felt really mad. What was happening? You have a trigger. You help them understand the trigger. You have a basic perception. This is dangerous. Everyone's out to get me. Here we go again. Right now, I know I'm worthless. Okay, you have a basic perception. It's always about danger. You have a body response. And sometimes people don't know about that either. What happens to you as you talk about this? I don't know. So, okay, let's stay here. Let's go over it again. You know, this is what happened to you in that meeting. This is what this person said. This is what your basic view of what was happening. How are you feeling about it right now? Well, I don't know. So, and then you go into a meaning making, which we always say, you know, what do you say to yourself? You know, and your action tendency. Well, I just got up and left the meeting. You know, so basically I run, right? So with Alison, the person you're going to see, she says, I'm just angry. Well, when do you get angry? Well, I don't know. Well, let's just stay with that. Will you get angry when anyone makes a demand of you? Yeah. People always make demands of me. You know, her family make the demand, pretend this never happened, you know, just pretend and come back and be with us. So she goes into, okay, she's got the trigger and she exits, she enrages, and then she puts the phone down, shuts the door, right? And what does she feel in her body? She doesn't know. How do you feel right now? Well, I feel sort of shaky, you know, but just a little bit shaky, you know, like not really shaky. And I don't know if I feel like, but right now you feel shaky, yeah? Yeah. And where do you feel shaky? Well, sort of here, you know, but it's no big deal. You know, I just feel shaky. So I said, oh, okay. And you put it together. So there's the trigger. Here's what happened last time. Here's the trigger. is the perception. This is how your body responds. And what do you say to yourself? And basically, people always talk about who they are. I say, it's a waste of time trying to relate to other people. I say, they don't understand me at all. Basically, she says, nobody sees me. Nobody cares. Everybody's dangerous, right? And then what does she do? And she tells me what she does. It's you know, it's kind of, it always touches me. She says, I numb out, and I've numbed out my whole life, and I'm empty because I've numbed out. And when you're totally numb, life doesn't mean anything, okay? I numb out, and then I eat. I said, you eat? She said, yes, I eat zoodles. I don't know what zoodles are. Maybe you guys, you American folks who are listening, you know what, I don't know what zoodles are. I presume they're like Cheerios or something. Anyway, she said, I sit and numb out and eat and watch television until I'm so numb I can't do anything else. And I said, and then you're okay for a bit and the whole thing starts again. She said, yes, that's right. And then we go for the underlying affect. And in trauma, most people expect it to be fear. But actually, in our experience, Leanne, maybe you can correct me if this isn't true for your clients, more and more and more, we experience that what you find underneath at a core level is deep, deep, deep grief and sadness. And in the middle of that grief and sadness is the longing to be seen and held and hear that you are precious, you matter to someone. The longing that is all about attachment, and that is in every human being. And people grieve, and you let them grieve. That longing was never answered. And what we say to people is, that's worth weeping for, isn't it? That's worth weeping for. What else would you do but weep? I feel it too. When you talk about it, I feel it too. It brings up feelings of sadness in me, and you weep. Yes, we need to weep for that, don't we? For what happened to you, right? It's deep sadness. And she says, I feel sad. I say, this is the lady who says, I don't want to feel. And then we take this alive drama, this emotional drama, which they don't even usually outline and make explicit, and we turn it into a drama around relationships and a self-identity. And we say, and you're going to see me doing this with Alison, we say, you know, you gave me an image. Do you remember talking to me about yourself? We talk about them as children because often that is just a road into their most vulnerable moments. You know, and sometimes we don't go there. People talk about their experience as adults where their whole family stood up and accused them of being a sinner, you know. You know, with Alison, we go to, do you remember talking about hiding under the bed when you were a child? And she brings this up in the therapy session you're going to see in a moment. And it's very difficult for her. The first few times she brings it up, she runs, she can't tolerate it. But then I go back to it again, and she goes into that. And what I ask her to do is see and connect with that part of herself, her vulnerable self. And she manages to do that just for a moment. You have to pace people. This is not about catharsis. This is not about ventilation. You evoke emotion, but you hold them at the same time. So just for a moment, she encounters and touches that little vulnerable self. And of course, when she does that, her whole image of self changes. Her whole sense of power changes. Oh, I am now an adult, and I can now see me. I can see me. I can go in and comfort me. I can make sense of my experience. Then maybe I can share it with my husband because now it makes sense and I feel like it's valid. Maybe I can go and share it with my husband. So we choreograph this moment, and then that's move 3. And, you know, that comes from basic Gestalt. It's our own version of Gestalt. Most experiential therapies try to choreograph encounters with different people in their lives, different aspects of self. right? But I think we have a very particular way of doing it in EFIT. Other approaches do it to AEDP, IFS, right? But we don't do it the way Pearls did it. Pearls did it in the service of separation and not needing people. We do it totally differently. Then move 4, we process the encounter. We say, let's look at what you just did. What happened here? How do you feel about it? We're actually saying, can you take it in? Can you process it? Can you stay with it? And we help people do that. And we talk about blocks to doing that, right? What happens to you? Of course, you block it, right? And then we move to 5, where we integrate and validate. And often that integration looks like people say, well, I'll never change. Change is impossible, doesn't happen. And we often say, look what you did right here. Look at the risks you took. Look at the incredible things you said. I've written them down, your key comments, because I'm going to repeat them. Look at what you did and the risks you took. That's amazing, isn't it? And people say, what? What did I do? Say, this is what you did. Wow. This is what you, and the message you get is, I see you grow. The message is, you can grow. You're growing right now. Look at you grow. Oh my God. That's what mothers do with kids. Good mothers do with kids. They don't say, oh my God, it's irritating that you're so afraid of the water at 6 years old. They say, look at what you did. You went and put your feet in the lake. Oh, wow. That's amazing. Right. And you told me you were never going to do that and that it was too scary. And you told me all kinds of scary things, but you did it. You did it. Wow. And we do this with people too. So this is the tango. And in our basic trainings, we talk about this a lot and we outline it in the primer. And this leads to core emotional epiphanies, usually that occur in move 3, when you turn your emotion into a living drama, your emotional reality. But you also have to integrate them and make them digestible, right, with the other moves. So this is a core intervention sequence that we note in EFIT and that creates the kind of emotional epiphanies that we know from all our research end up in impacting depression, anxiety, PTSD, people's sense of self, people's secure attachment, people's sense of who they are. We know this from all our research. We're one of the few psychotherapies who've looked at personality variables like security of attachment and shown that our interventions influence that. You can find all the research on the ICEF site, www.iceeft.com. You can read that research. I think you would find that it's, for a research program, it's amazingly clinically orientated and relevant to how a clinician conducts a session. So I think we're supposed to have a break now. Leanne, what have I forgotten to say about the tango? Tons, because this is just a 3-hour workshop, but what have I forgotten to say about the tango?
Well, no, I think it's a beautiful summary. And just to maybe summarize it before we go on to a break, and what you'll be seeing is you'll be seeing us each demonstrate our work with our clients. We'll point out the moves. You're going to notice some of the reflections, the way that we track and that we validate. And one of the ways that I think about the tango, Sue, is initially we're kind of zooming out and getting a picture of their story, putting it together for them. And then we're moving toward helping them to order their experience, their internal emotional worlds, a place that our clients don't usually visit for all kinds of good reasons that make sense in the context of their histories. Then we move to deepening, as you said, going down the elevator. And once we have that, can feel that, it's tangible, visceral, something that we can all taste. And then we invite the client to share that with a key other. And we have good reasons for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we make decisions about that. And then we zoom out. And when we talk about assessment and treatment merging, I think Move Forward is a perfect example of that. And you highlighted it. You said, can you take it in? That older, wiser you responded to that little girl. Did she take it in? Could she take it in? What happened? And oftentimes, when we ask about that, we don't just ask at the level of cognition. We ask at the in terms of bodily sense, especially in working in the context of trauma. What happened in her little body? What did you see in her eyes? What did you feel when her eyes touched yours? And then we zoom out again and integrate it, like you're saying. Otherwise, it can get lost because we are truly taking people into new territory.
Yes.
If we don't zoom out and help them make cognitive sense of it and put it together, it potentially, they feel that something shifted, but they don't know how they got there. So part of it is really engaging with our clients and making them a part of the process so that they can begin to, of course, take these risks outside the therapy context. Growth occurs within and between sessions and over the course of and beyond therapy.
Right. I think the only thing I want to make sure people understand is that in couples therapy, we create these, in Move 3, we create these interactions with the other person in the room. In EFIT, we acknowledge the wisdom of Irvin Yalom, who says, you have to get to know the cast of characters that live in your clients' heads. I invite you to think about how much of your day is spent in conversation with imaginary people at work, with your family, with someone who hurt you from the past. You know, you'll find you're going for a walk with the dog in the most beautiful setting. And why are you talking to somebody who you feel insulted you 6 years ago? Well, you just are, you know, because somehow you just want to tell them, you know, and clearly, you know, how outrageous. And so I invite you to think about how much of your life is really about internal conversations with imaginary people, and sometimes with parts of you, you know, like, oh, you're so, I turned the wrong way and hurt my ankle yesterday. And I heard myself say to myself, oh, you're just impossible. Like, really, you know, this is the second time in 3 weeks that you've hurt yourself. What the hell is wrong? I thought, what am I doing? Why why am I beating? I'm beating myself up. So, oh, I think I'll have a tea instead, you know. So, you know, we use it in an imagination level, but of course it's the moments that are significant for us that we focus in on. You have to know the moments where the client defines themselves and defines their emotional world. Okay, so why don't we have a very short break, which is all about you guys going to the washroom, getting a drink, you know, thinking about maybe some of the things that we've said that hit you. Let's just have, my clock says 20 to 12. Can we literally just take 4 minutes? Do you think that's okay, Leanne? That's
yes, perfect.
Let's just take 4 minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to show you, I'm going to show you a piece of Alison. If you have seen other EFIT trainings, you may have seen her before. I feel fine about that because sessions like I'm going to show you seem very rich to me, and I watch them more than once, and I get something new each time I watch them. So if you've seen it again, if you've seen it before, it's okay, I think. But I'm going to show you session 6, I believe it was.
Yes.
20 minutes of session 6 with Alison. Then Leanne and I will chat about it. And then Leanne will show a piece of tango and how we basically intervene as EFIT therapists with complex PTSD, attachment, wounded trauma survivors. So let's stop and have a 4-minute break. Thank you, people, for your attention.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Good. Okay, see you soon. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. And we see that there are lots of questions, and we appreciate your engagement. And we will definitely make time for those. But right now, we're going to show you some of our work with Selena and with Allison.
Okay. So I think first we're going to show me working session 6 with Allison, right?
Yes. And
this is a lady who says, I can't live numb. I don't want to feel. This is the lady who talks about shutting down and eating zoodles. Okay. And who was constantly sexually abused by her brothers from the time she was about 6 to, I'm not quite sure what age it stopped, to tell you the truth, but then unfortunately at one point she was sent to live with her father and his new wife, and then her stepbrother also abused her. And the response to that, when people found out about that, was the same as the original abuse, which was the stepmother said, well, you must have basically seduced him, and it was all your fault. And the father said something like, why didn't you tell me, or something. So you won't see me helping her confront her father. We leave that to the client. Sometimes they do need to confront the person, the attachment figure who left them alone at these moments. And sometimes they don't. We follow them as to what's significant for them. But here you'll see Allison going in and being able to connect with self. What I want to say, but you're going to see me doing move 2, which is deepening emotion, which I've already outlined in other sessions. And you're going to see me doing move 3, which is creating an encounter. And I'm always aware of her window of tolerance, which is small. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm careful about how I go in, and I'm careful how long I stay there. Right, so you're going to see me doing that. This is the first time that she's actually really allowed me to do this. Often when we try the first move 3, traditionally, we might say something like, if the person's obsessed with the person who injured them, we might say something like, can you see your older sister in your head when she's telling you you're a sinner in front of the family? What happens to you? And we'll take them back into that. And the client, I believe this is in a book somewhere. I can't remember. Leanne, help me remember. Fern in the book.
Oh, yes. Yeah. In the ATIP book, Attachment Theory.
Oh, thank you so much. The Attachment Theory and Practice book. Yes. Fern does close her eyes and go into confronting her older sister. And at first her response is complete chaotic panic, and then she's able to regulate herself and come out and take a position, at least in her imagination, with her sister, right? And that helps her even imagine that there's another way to be with her sister and to define herself differently, not as a sinner, right? So that's Fern doing what she needs to do with the actual person who injured her. But here, for various reasons, because it feels right to me, I focus on, can Allison actually connect with the vulnerable part of self? And we often go into literally, can you see that part? Can you literally even allow yourself to see that part, even cognitively? You're in your head, in your imagination. And it fascinates me how so many of our clients say, no. And that's how she starts off of, no, I know, or they might say, I have no specific memories. Well, they do. Once we start making it safe to feel, they do, right? And they come up with an image. But at first, often they say, no, I can't see that part of me. No, I had one client say to me, that part of me is a ghost. Oh, could you help me? And we sit with ghost for 10 minutes. Ghost, could you help me? Help me understand. Well, I hear is scary. Ghosts are scary, right? But he just turns it into, oh no, I can't see this person, and right. And then it's like can you actually connect with this vulnerable part of you? And can you connect from the place of the adult who is sitting in front of me doing therapy and being resourced by me? Can you connect from that, protective sense of other and protective sense of self? Can you connect with the most vulnerable part of you with that? And it's very powerful. One of the most powerful statements, which I always like to tell people about, is in the primer. And it's me working with Henny, who was probably the most traumatized, complex PTSD traumatized client I've ever worked with. And she did not ever remember herself being raped by her father. She just remembered watching her sisters be raped by her father. She knew she was raped by her father. She couldn't remember. Well, she does. At a certain point in EFIT, she remembers very vividly the first time she was raped. And she goes into that, and it's amazingly difficult and powerful for her. And at the end of the session, I'm worried about her. And I tell her that. And, the next time she comes in, I tell her I was worried about her. And she smiles at me, big smile, and says, I'm fine. I say, oh, really? Could you help me understand that? And she says, I'm fine, Sue, because now I have me, you see. I have me. I actually have an image of the strong, powerful part of me going in and seeing that little girl who's just been raped and holding her and telling her, it's okay, you escape. There is a way out. You find a way out. It's okay. I'm here now. It's okay. I see you. I see you're hurt. I'm here. I'm with you. And so she says, literally, I have me. And from my point of view, that is a key moment in her healing, right? So let's look at Alison. And she starts off by talking about the fact that her brothers call her up and say, we hear through the grapevine you might be getting married. Are we coming? Are we going to get invites? Everybody's pretending this stuff never happened, right? So she starts there. Let's watch 20 minutes of me doing move 2 and move 3 of the tango with Alison.
Okay, thank you.
Like, they keep asking for when are you going to get invitations to the wedding and stuff, and it's like, you're not coming. Like, they don't see none of these people who are supposed to be your safe place and supposed to take care of you. None of them see how massively wounded you've been and still are. None of them saw you. None of them moved to protect you or help you. Some of them actively abused you. None of them saw you, right? You were all alone, silently suffering, staying in your head, and trying to shut all these feelings down, because to feel them would make you feel even worse, yeah? Until Nathan. And somehow you broke all the rules and you found your courage and you reached for him. And that's kind of amazing, isn't it? And you took the risk and you reached for him. That's incredible that you did that, right? Were you able to talk to him about the last session? Yeah. I felt like a grumpy teenager who didn't want to participate in group activities. And he's like, it's fine. You had a bad day. It'll be fine.
The grumpy teenager. Yeah. You're right. I've met a few of those. Well, it is fine, because you get to be the grumpy teenager here. You get to
as far as I'm concerned, you have the right. You get to say, hey, Sue, I don't know if I can go here. Hey, Sue, this is hard. Hey, Sue, this goes against everything that kept me sort of safe growing up. You know, being in my head, pretending, shutting down, you know, just suffering silently. We're pushing on that. We're pushing on that. And that's what I know, right? It hurts. It keeps me stuck in all the stuff we talked about, which is shaking, you know, going into a fog, blaming yourself, you know, finally ending up in depression. But it's familiar. Yeah, you know that one. Whereas for you, when you were little, to actually let yourself feel, I don't know, there was no space for that. There was no one. There wasn't anybody to hold those feelings, was there?
No.
Right. So what comes up for you right now as we talk about this? How it's naturally hard and how you do get to be the grumpy teenager telling Sue, no, I don't want to, no. How does that?
I don't think that's how I sound.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you're right. That's me. That's me. That's me being silly. Okay. That's my grumpy teenager. Okay. That's where I go sometimes. No, I'm not going to. Okay. So, but how does it feel as we talk about this?
I don't know. It just kind of brings me back to being that little girl alone in her room.
Yes. 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 And when you look at her, what's the feeling that comes up?
Just sadness. It's kind of pity. Like, I remember I used to sleep under my bed some nights.
Oh,
And I kind of blocked that out, and then I remembered it last session. I'm just like, how terrified was I to think that under my bed with all my toys would be the safest place to be at night in my own home.
oh, Alison.
Just sad.
Yeah. That's really sad, isn't it? I hear you. I feel sad for that little girl. You feel sad for that little girl. How awful in your home to feel so scared and so alone that the only safe place is to crawl under your bed in the dark with your toys. Right. Right. So when you think of that little girl now, silently suffering, trying not to feel, all by herself, and you think of her now, what comes up is sadness for her. Yeah. It shouldn't be like that, should it, for any little girl? Sadness, and you can feel her terror. Yeah. And there was no one. She didn't have a Nathan then. No, there was no one. Right? Maybe, did she have a favorite toy?
She did. I didn't name that toy. Maybe it was Emily or something like that.
So maybe she went under the bed and she held Emily. But that's worth weeping for, isn't it? And nobody saw her. Nobody saw her pain. And she had to pretend and keep it to herself. But you see it right now. I see it. I'm sure if you talk to Nathan, maybe you've talked to Nathan about this already, he sees it. Right? But back then, no one saw it. And that brings up terror and grief and sadness for her. Yeah, it's worth weeping for her. There was no one to weep for her. Can you feel that terror when we talk about it? Is it like the shakiness we talked about?
Sue, it's so beautiful. I just want to point out a few things that we were describing earlier in the session, and that you're demonstrating. You're demonstrating pacing, how you use your voice, how you reflect and validate and say in all kinds of ways, I hear you, I see you, I'm here with you. And you remind her, and Nathan's there too. He wasn't then, but he is now. And then you ask about, another potential resource, this little toy. Was there a toy, Emily? And you use her words like you were talking about earlier when we talked about risk, poignant phrases, suffering in silence that really capture her experience. And the more that you do that, the more she goes into the experience and the frightening, alien, and unacceptable emotion that would have been, of course, intolerable, unsafe to feel all alone. And again, you do that all the while reminding her that she's not alone. You're there too. And yeah.
Okay. Watching yourself do therapy is rather strange. Okay, jolly good. That's what I do. Great, Leanne. All right.
Beautiful.
I'm aware of the risk she's taking here.
Yes.
And it's foreign. It's not.
Mhm.
This is the first time, session 6, that she, kind of lets me into the sadness and she's been diagnosed with serious depression, okay? And at one point in therapy, not in this session, it really struck me, we stay with the depression label. And what she goes to, it's after session 6, I know that, is we stay with that and stay with that. And what she feels and what she says is, I'm heartbroken. And that is what she is. And that is a much more useful diagnosis than depression. I'm heartbroken. Yes, she is. Her family broke her heart. And really, she's trying desperately to recover from heartbreak. It's a very powerful image, that. And so we don't use depression or borderline or OCD or goodness, she had 2 others. I can't remember all the diagnoses, they're irrelevant because they don't get specific and access how the client process their experience. But heartbreak does. Heartbreak, when your heart starts to break, and in order to stop the pain, you get enraged, you shut down, you go into a fog, you eat zoodles, you shut people out. But the trouble with that one is then you're stuck with that way. That's your life, right? So, So she talks about heartbreaks. What's interesting to me as I watch this is I'm really saying to her, what's most relevant for you, for us to talk about the fear or the sadness? I ask her, I'm not explicitly saying that to her, but that's what I'm doing. And basically she's clear. It's the sadness that, because I think she has dealt with a lot of the fear. But of course, she's also not accessed this image of herself under the bed before, which is very interesting because it's very specific and very filled with emotion, right? So yeah. So I'm following her here. I'm also very aware this is the first time she's touched all this, so I'm going to be awfully careful about how much we do and how far we go and how long I keep her here.
can feel it, but it's not as big as it was then.
Right. And is it like the shakiness or is it something else?
No, just sad. Just I've dealt with so much since that terror I felt feels almost like nothing, but it's still sad.
Okay, so what you're telling me, if I'm hearing you right, is Sue, she was terrified, all by herself under the bed, hiding her pain, hiding her fear, suffering silently, trying to, the idea of keeping her family together, keeping her family safe, right? But when you think about it now, the terror isn't so present for you. What is true is the sadness. Yeah. Yeah. And can you feel that sadness in your body?
Kind of. It feels like it's a shadow. Like I know how that felt, but I'm still kind of not allowing myself to feel that, or it doesn't feel as bad as it was. But like I know in those moments when I was hiding that I was terrified. That was the scariest thing. And I think now as an adult, I've faced so much more that's terrifying and it doesn't feel so bad.
Yeah.
But I know
The word shadow is such a powerful
Isn't it?
descriptor of her place in the experience.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure how much to follow it, but I was getting pulled by the sadness. But isn't it? But look at what she's saying.
Basically,
I don't really allow myself to feel it.
exactly.
Right? But she's touching it. This is much more a willingness to stay with her emotional experience that she's demonstrated in others. Where this young woman, when I first suggested she do a very short, mild version of move 3, I can't remember what it was. She basically said, "That's a stupid idea. Why would you do that? I'm not doing that. I'm not talking to someone who isn't here. Why would you talk to someone who isn't here?" I say, "Oh," and then when people ask us that, we tell them it's their session. We're transparent. We include them in the process. Oh, well, yes, that's a very good question. I understand. It seems very strange. And this is what we find. This is how come we do this. And what we hope will happen is this. And then the next time she is like a grumpy teacher. And she's like, "Well, this is stupid. Don't want to do it." But now you watch her, she starts to do it. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. For me, you stayed focused, but I was just aware that that's such a great descriptor that helps us to know where she is in the process. That word shadow.
Yes. Yeah, I can see it. It's a shadow.
Yes.
You're stronger, right? You're not trapped. Remember using the word trapped. You're not trapped, right? You got out. You survived. You're stronger. But that sadness and that feeling of being scared is still somehow part of your reality, right? It's part of that place you go when you get caught in your blood boiling and you shaking and trying to snap out of it, and the sort of dance that we talked about, right? It's still there, that sadness and that scared feeling, yeah, for that little girl. If you think about that little girl hiding under the bed, I remember I said to you, I think it was 2 sessions ago, but I can't remember. if you think about that little girl hiding under the bed now, as adult Alison, who escaped, who found a way out, who did suffer silently and then got dreadfully wounded when she stopped being silent. That was awful, right? She found that.
You named the attachment injury.
Yes. When she tried to tell her pain, nobody heard her. Her dad didn't hear her. Stepmother certainly didn't hear her. A stepbrother wasn't interested in hearing her. Nobody heard her, right? But now the adult Alison has found Nathan, can walk into his arms and feel the heat of his arms. Right now, the adult Alison has found her feet. She's out in the world. She's not trapped anymore. And I remember asking you, can that adult you, who has got so much strength, who's been through so much terror, can that adult you turn and look at that little girl? And you said, I don't want to, which I really understand. But this is a bit more specific now. I wonder if you just imagine that little girl, Alison, underneath the bed, maybe holding on to her favorite toy, Emily, underneath the bed, in the dark, hiding, right? Suffering silently. If you think about that little girl now, can you see her? Can you bend down as the adult Alison and look under the bed, the little one hiding there, feeling so scared and so sad? Can you see her? Yeah.
Setting up the move 3 encounter, making contact.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like I can see her too. If you did that, if you were there as the stronger you, and you bent down and you saw that little girl hiding under the bed, what would you like to say to her?
I'm not sure.
You can see her? You can see her, right? Yeah, you can see her? Maybe you just want to say, I can see you, because nobody did they? Nobody saw you. Maybe you just want to say, hey, little Alison, little silently suffering one, I can see you. Can you imagine?
I think if I was there, I would just crawl under the bed with her.
Yes. 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 Because you'd feel her sadness, wouldn't you? You'd feel her fear, and you'd know how alone she is. Yeah. Yes. I'd want to do that too. You'd crawl under the bed with her so that she wasn't all by herself. Yeah, help me out. What would you do? What would you do? You'd crawl under the bed and
Hold her.
hold her. I want you to just close your eyes for a minute and really see yourself doing that. Can you? You see her. Nobody sees her. She's suffering in silence all the time, pretending. You see her. You see how scared she is, how alone she is. You feel her sadness and her hopelessness, how trapped she feels. Use the word trapped last time. How trapped she feels. You see her. Yeah. And you just want to, you go and you crawl under the bed with her and you hold her. Yeah. You hold her. Put your arms around her. The stronger Allison. The wiser Allison. Put your arms around her. Right. I want you to really see that. Yeah. Does she let you? Does she let you hold her? Can she let you hold her?
Move 4 of the tango.
Yes. Can the most vulnerable part of you even begin to take that? And sometimes the answer is no. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Good. I want you to really see that. The stronger, wiser you coming in, holding her. She lets you hold her. Maybe she just relaxes into your arms. Yeah. What's happening for you as we describe this scene? This is what never happened. This is what you never got. This is what you must have longed for. You were starved of this. What happens to you when you think of this? When you feel this?
I'm feeling how starved I was of it.
Yes. You were. You were starved. No one saw you. No one held you. People abused you. Yeah. Right.
Call from private caller.
Sorry, I forgot to turn my phone
Call
off.
from private caller.
Okay.
This is an example of what you don't want to happen, which is an interruption at a very poignant point. And I want you to note that I just continue. And because of the emotional relevance, she just comes with me. Okay. She was starved. She had no choice but to suffer in silence. Yeah. Can you say something to her? I'm curious as to what you would say to her. What would you like to say to her?
Probably something along the lines of you can sleep now or something like that. I don't think I would lie and say everything's gonna be okay.
You would sleep now. You can sleep now. Is that the end of the tape? I can't remember exactly where it stops, Leanne. Yes, I think that's the end. Yes, she's actually having lots of trouble sleeping, so that's kind of interesting. To say that you can sleep now.
Mhm.
Your clients give you messages that they can't tolerate much more. She would do a lot of business. She'd turn and drink her drink and rearrange her plant and tidy her desk and
and it's interesting to me that she turns and blows her nose. I'm sure that's natural, but it also says to me, careful, careful, this is the first time she's touched this stuff. Let's not make it long. And what I do is I summarize what she's done, validate her, tell her what she's done, right? How amazing she is. And then we talk for the rest of the session about, could she even imagine sharing a little bit of this with Nathan? And she actually closes her eyes again and imagines telling Nathan. Then she goes home and actually does tell Nathan. But this is a young woman who, when I first suggested she do move 3, particularly when she asked her to close her eyes, she was absolutely contemptuous. It's like, that's weird and I'm not doing it. And now here she is doing it, right? Because we've done the work before of setting up the emotional context and moving into the core affect of sadness. Core affect underneath trauma is not just terror and helplessness, which is really got a huge amount of aloneness and longing embedded in it, but it's also about shame. It's all because of me. There's something wrong with me. I'm unworthy. That's why I didn't get the care I needed. And it's also about deep, 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 deep grief for what was taken from us, what we longed for, and what our nervous system just told us to search for. And instead, to the people that we turned to for a solution to our vulnerability, we got more and more danger and more sense of complete helplessness. So I think that shows people. I'm aware that we're over time a bit.
I think it's okay. So
Do you? I'm not sure how long your piece with Selena is.
my clip is short.
Okay,
yeah.
jolly good. Okay, good. I'm looking forward to seeing your piece. Okay.
Okay. I'll just make a couple of comments about yours, Sue, just because I think they're such a powerful demonstration of what you're saying, that as she begins to touch what wasn't and is possible, it puts her straight in touch with that sense of loss and grief.
Yes.
Name it. And that's so important for us to do that again, because otherwise it gets lost. And our clients don't necessarily see that. And then one other point is, of course, along the way, and if you do other trainings with us, we'll get into a lot more detail about this, but there's always many questions about how we choose and how we make decisions around these move 3 encounters. And what I noted was that, and it makes perfect developmental sense in terms of the therapy process, but also that the client's age, that you have the adult turn to the younger child, and not the opposite, which makes perfect sense. That would be way too intolerable, way too much, way outside her capacity at this point.
Yes. Yeah, and I think the answer to the question of who you decide to access in move 3 is you follow the client.
Yes.
Follow the client. If you say at another point in therapy, can you imagine talking to your father? And the client sort of says, whatever. There's no charge, right? There's no emotional charge there. You don't follow that. You go where the emotional charge is. You follow the affect. You follow the client and the client's, how they deal with their vulnerability, what is most relevant to them. It's not like you decide what drama really matters and where did you decide who you are. They'll tell you. If you listen to their affect, they'll tell you, no, here's where the pain is. Here's where it's difficult for me to engage. Oh, okay, let's go there, right? So let's look at your case with Selena, a little bit of your case.
Okay, and then we're going to turn to questions and provide a summary. So this is Selena, and this is also stage 1. In other words, our key goal here is to help our clients begin to touch what has been untouchable around their inner emotional worlds, their affect, their emotional experience, their felt experience in some of these intolerable, terrifying moments, which is such a powerful image, Sue, that you helped us to see and to be a part of in watching your work with Allison. In this case, Selena talks to me again. Our clients, if we listen carefully, they'll often use the same terms throughout the process: alone, lonely. I'd come home from school, there was no one there. But at this point, I'm living close to my grandma's house. So even though there was a period of cutoff because they were trying to get my mom into treatment, I still could feel the comfort. And it's now after having resourced Selena with her grandma, in other words, made that resource explicit, and felt that I can refer to that in the session. So let me just play a few minutes. And what you're going to see me doing in this case is very similar, is helping Selena to access some of the experience that she doesn't normally access. Those of you who work in trauma, I'm sure have experienced this. Oftentimes when our clients begin to share about their experiences, a flood of memories emerge. It's like, oftentimes my first responders that I work with will talk about like a Rolodex or a moving film, and there's one memory after another. And you're going to see me focus the session and do a little bit of work with Selena. So let's turn to it now. Okay, and what do I say to her? I say to slow this down and to focus it. I ask her to stay really still in that experience. Just turn to slide. There we are. Organizing my. There we go. Okay. I mean, I get it. The thing that happens is when we get close to some of these difficult moments in your life, it's like a flood of memories come back, and images and fleeting sort of pictures of people and things that have happened. So if we kind of stop the video and just stay focused on you and kind of let all of those other pictures fade into the background. What do you see when you see you? That 10-year-old. The 10-year-old who's come home from school and she's alone again. Nobody's there.
I used to play in the backyard by myself after school. I would walk home and nobody would be home. And my sister used to go to a babysitter with her best friend. Again, she had better opportunities than I did. And I actually learned to enjoy, even though I was alone, it wasn't dangerous because my grandma's house, even though my mom didn't let me talk to her during that time, she was right there.
All right, you could feel your grandma's presence.
Like it was on her property and I knew nothing was going to happen there.
Selena, if we go into that space, she's referencing it's not a party house.
Right.
And I'll come too. What help me to see the backyard? Like, is it street or is it lawn or is it?
It's rectangular and there's a big hill. There's like a cherry tree.
Okay.
There's this massive, huge tree, and there's a whole bunch of old maple trees. There's a lilac tree, too.
What time of year is it, Selena?
Fall.
Okay, so the lilacs are gone.
Yeah. Do you know when the sun starts setting, like pretty much as soon as your workday is over, you get outside, it's already dark.
Wow. That's where you are. It's in the fall and it's after school and before dark, but it's starting to get dark.
Yeah.
I'm using the scene to take her into the felt experience, and I'm making it explicit that I'm there too.
Yes, I love that you make it explicit. You said, I'm with you. I'm there too. Yes.
And where is this 10-year-old? Where are you? Where is this? Beautiful.
We had a wood shed, and then we had an A-frame like shed with the basketball hoop on the front of it. And then behind it, we had a swing on a tree.
Yeah.
And I used to, well, I played on the whole property, but around there, yeah, the swing.
Selena, what do you feel in your body as you get close to that to that 10-year-old you?
I don't feel anything.
That's okay. Are you able to get close to her? Are you able to move toward her? And I'll be with you. I can feel the yard more now.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where are you in relation to her?
My grandfather poured a concrete basketball court.
Oh wow.
It was, the key in
Yeah.
a basketball court. We had that. So close, but not too close. That's what I see, several feet.
I can get close, but not too close. It's akin to the shadow.
It's perfect, isn't it? Yeah, I can see her, but yeah.
Maybe 8 feet away.
From her.
Hmm.
Yeah, and help me to see what you see. I'll be with you as well, near that basketball. It's good, Selena. You're doing well. Great job. Stay really still in your gut.
It's hard because I was so damaged already that even with my own family, I would stay away.
Right. It's hard to get close to her because she was so
Hurt.
yeah, hurt.
Mhm.
That's a good word, isn't it? Hurt.
Even my own mom, I would stand on the other side of the room from her.
There's mom. And you're going to notice that I'm not going to, I'm going to stay focused on helping her to make contact with herself. Again,
Yes.
yeah, for all the reasons we described earlier. Yeah.
I would say from that age until until I was 30.
Well, Selena, this is good. Okay, so she's 8 feet away and you're there and I'm kind of there right behind you, beside you. What do you want to say to her from that distance? If you just stay in your body now and you see her, move 3 encounter. And again, I make a similar decision for all the same reasons developmentally and in terms of the process, therapy process.
Right.
Help me to see her a bit more. What's she wearing, Selena? So that I can really be there with you as well.
I don't even really remember my clothes specifically.
Okay. Yes, Selena, maybe not from your memory, but just from your body now as you are in that scene and I'm there too. But what just comes up? It doesn't have to be accurate. Well, what's the image that comes up for you of that 10-year-old?
Yeah, I remember
Keeping her in the experience.
Right.
And
my older cousins used to give me jeans. So I wore poorly fitting jeans all the time.
yeah.
I did, yeah.
How's your hair? What does your hair look like?
Um,
What's her hair look like?
Actually, it was my hair was really dark, almost black during those years. Nobody even taught me how to put my hair in a pony at that age. So it was down all the time. And it wasn't like nicely down. I would just let it go.
It was long hair or short, medium.
Like here. Yeah. And my mom used to give me these horrible haircuts. So maybe twice a year I'd get a haircut. And I just hated it. So I would look forward to growing it out until I had to get my next haircut. But I remember I went like 3 or 4 years without a haircut.
Yeah. Selena, this is good. Let's stay in that space. So I can sense the yard and the basketball hoop and the sheds and the key and this young you, this 10-year-old, kind of in that space, and you're there, and I'm kind of in your background alongside you. You're about 8 feet away, and she's wearing baggy jeans and her hair is down. Do you see her face, Selena?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, help me to see her. What do you see when you see her face?
I was quite vacant.
Quite what? Sorry?
If my expression wasn't vacant,
Oh,
I was
vacant.
scared. It was fear or vacancy.
Yeah, making contact with her experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you see in her eyes now?
Fear.
Yeah. Okay, good, Selena. What does your gut want to say to her? If your body could speak, just really.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
That's nice, Selena.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to her eyes when you say that? Move 4 of the tango. What happens to her eyes as you tell her, I'm not going to hurt you?
They change.
See her. What do they look like?
Relief.
Yes.
I used to hold my breath when people would approach me.
Is she breathing now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you drawn to do next, Selena? Now what happens?
Nobody asked me questions about my life.
Nobody saw me. Nobody cared about me. I was alone.
Nobody asked me what I thought or felt. Like,
Do you want to ask her? Do you want to ask her questions?
yeah.
What do you want to ask her, Selena?
How are you?
What does
What
she
are you
say?
doing?
What does she say back?
I used to just say fine all the time. Fine. Yeah. But nothing was fine. Like literally nothing.
Are you able to be in her? It's too much. That all that little girl could say would be to say fine. So now
Right.
I see. I assess. I invite Selena to be in that little girl's body, and I'll be the older, wiser other. Her body. Do you feel like you could be in her body, and I'll be with you? Are you able to be in her body and share? If I ask you, how are you able to share? From your gut, in the body of that 10-year-old in the baggy jeans, or the unfitting jeans, you said, and the long hair.
If I had to be that person, I think it would be super traumatic for me. The last time I felt that way was when Jerry left.
I hear you, Selena. Selena, that's exactly what this is all about. It is to be able to feel what that little girl. I provide the rationale and with the goal of being transparent. Transparency provides agency, but I also want to see how far we can go in helping her to encounter some of this experience. Wouldn't have felt safe to feel and to share that with somebody, to not be alone in it. That's what this is all about. But not for it to be traumatic, of course. So you tell me how this goes, okay? Do you feel like you can share from your gut, from your body, from your throat, from your chest, about that feeling of being alone and abandoned and not trusting and hurt?
It's so bad. Like, I can't articulate.
It's okay, Selena, you're doing amazing. It's beautiful. Good for you to give voice to some of that experience as much as you're able. Yeah, it's good. Let yourself breathe and feel some of that. You don't have to be alone in it this time. So this is, I'm doing exactly what you were sharing. Sue, I'm careful, especially because she uses the word traumatic. So I want to be sure that we take her to her leading edge in a way that allows her to expand her window of tolerance, to tune into and feel and to share in a safe space and place some of what she couldn't share and feel, but not too much. And then I share with her, do you see what you just did? And that when you took the risk.
Yes, she touches it. You say, can you touch it? And she says, don't want to. Yes, all right. And she says to the soft part of her, I won't hurt you. The very most basic thing on earth, I won't hurt you. Right. And then she says, I can breathe. And I didn't used to breathe around people. This is so poignant. But you say, can you just touch it? And then that's enough, right? You say, but, and she's just able to say things like, it was so bad. It was so bad, right? And this little girl endured years of this. When we work with trauma, one of the things that hits me about working with trauma is the incredible, I don't even know what the right word is, respect, admiration that I have for our clients and for traumatized people. Sometimes people from the outside look and they see dysfunction or pathology. What I see is the amazing bravery and resilience that human beings have to reach in the darkness, to reach for what they've never had and really they should have no hope for, and that their experience tells them is dangerous. They'll reach anyway because that's wired into us. And she's incredible doing this with you, right? And she's saying, this is really hard. I can touch it for a second. I can see that kid for a second, but it's so bad, right? And that's the beginning of being able to look at it and work with it. And I love that you resourced her with the
she talks about the grandmother. She's just over there. I wasn't allowed to speak to her, but she's over there, right? So that's great, sweetie. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I think we have time for some Q&As. I know
Yes.
we've covered a lot of ground. We've showed you a lot of stuff just in 3 hours. You know, and I invite you to look at the writings and to look at our research. You know, so maybe we can stop and we can have some questions. Victoria, you have some questions for us.
I do. Thank you so much for showing videos of your work. I'm sure I speak for most everybody when I say that that is such an important and beautiful way of getting to understand how a therapy approach can be effective for clients. And I felt that those sessions that you showed clips of were incredibly moving and really, really useful to learn from.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And it takes a tremendous amount of bravery, as all of us who've done it too know, to put your work out there for others to scrutinize. So thank you from that level too for sharing.
Oh, you're most welcome. I just assume you can't learn to dance from a book. You
Yes.
can't learn to dance without watching somebody dance.
Mm.
Hey, you just can't do it. Okay,
So true.
so we
There-
feel obliged to show you what we do.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions about the concern of avoiding re-traumatization, which kind of came up in that video of Leanne's. What tips do you have, or what can you share with us about how to avoid re-traumatization when you're doing EFIT?
Leanne, it was your client. Do you want to speak to?
Sure. Well, I think that the map really gives us confidence in the model. And also I believe in my, now we're further along in the process, so I have some sense of her capacity in terms of resources outside as well. And I'm very clear about the roadmap. What am I trying to do? I'm helping her to feel what would have been intolerable to feel, unsafe to feel, but in the presence of another. And that's what's going to be transformative. That's what's going to move her forward in this therapy process. So to not do so, of course, would be to, be a disservice, but for sure to overshoot her capacity would also be problematic and would leave her feeling like this is more of the same. But I'm aware of her strengths. She has so many strengths that we didn't even talk about beyond the resource of her grandmother. She's very bright. She found her way out of some of these experiences she had as a little girl. She has resources in the community, and I'm watching and I'm paying close attention to whether she would dissociate, for example, or whether she would become overly dysregulated. We're very, very tuned in to the emotional music of this dance that we're doing with our clients that helps gauge that. But I always preface it at the beginning in some way. It wasn't totally explicit this time, but that as you're able to do. Let's just see how this goes, or something like that. Because again, and especially when we're working with trauma and developmental trauma, longstanding experiences of trauma, I want her to have agency. I want her to be able to say, no, that's too much. I don't know if you want to add to that, Sue.
Oh, well, I think the essence of that question is that as you learn EFT, you learn that you hold and order emotion as you invite people to touch it. And first of all, they touch it and see it, then they let it in a little bit and they let it in, and it's a process. But you order emotion, and that's what we do. And if you understand the structure of emotion, and you understand, if you like, the structure of personality, which attachment tells us, yes, you feel more and more confident in being able to do that. I was asking myself if I've ever felt, the only time I ever remember feeling concerned about re-traumatization was the session that I shared with Henny in the first chapter of the primer. And actually, Victoria, that did feel like I need to have courage to share, okay? Because it's very intense. And I was worried, she'd taken a long time to get there. It was something like session 28 or something, right? And she led me there. I didn't decide, now she's going to remember her first rape by her father, or, so she was ready. But nevertheless, I was concerned about re-traumatization. I told her, I'm worried about you, and you can email me during the week, and I will respond. But look at her response. I think the issue is, if you know how to go into emotion, but through, if you know how to help people order and regulate at the same time as you evoke, the threat of re-traumatization isn't so worrying. And we follow our client. As Leanne says, you're tuned into your client. So, and if your client says, which Alison has said before this session, which is, I don't want to do this, we say, okay. And we look at the block. We say, of course, that makes sense. You don't want to do it. And could you help me understand, if you do it, this is the worry for you. And actually in the session, I now remember, in the session 5 before this one, she'd actually said to me, I'm not going to do it. Well, I'm not going to feel, and I'm not going to do this thing with the eyes and I'm not going to do it. I'm not up for it. I'm not going to do it. Right. And I said, okay, that's fine. And we stay with the block. I understand. And we outlined all the dreadful fears she had of what was going to happen when she did it. Then she comes in the next session, she does it. Okay. So I think the art of good therapy is to hold the client, contain the client, validate the client's strength, and at the same time, to be able to move the client forward, to take the client where there is frightening, alien, and unacceptable emotion, but pace it according to their ability to tolerate that, right? So our experience in research is that indeed people, not everyone, the level of resolution or health or growth at the end of EFIT varies, of course, because it varies in every kind of therapy and every kind of, so people end up in different places. But our research tells us that in general, people are not re-traumatized. They grow in all kinds of ways, right? How much they grow, well, that's to do with all kinds of variables that we don't necessarily have control over, right?
You said something that's so important, I think, that I think about a lot, but I do, to help the client move through. We talk about no solution vulnerability. So the other thing that guides me is I don't want to take Selena into a place of vulnerability and not do something with it. When I've set it up so that there's all these resources. And then as Sue's describing, if she's not able to do very much or anything with it, that's okay. We can that and validate that and punctuate the process right there, right now. And that's totally okay.
And often it's when you say to a client, I really understand this is too hard, that the client does it. The client says, yes, it's too hard. And then they turn around and, and they do it, and it's sometimes surprising. In the course we're doing in the spring, I think, Victoria, where we do a consultation course, and we show clients that we get stuck with. The gentleman I'm working with is highly intellectual, highly intellectual, and tells me therapists are stupid, they don't understand me, and you won't be able to understand me either. And I say, okay, jolly good. So and he basically says no to me all the time. In the first 10 sessions, he's always saying no to me. He's saying, no, I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about existential dilemmas. Oh, goodness me. All right. Okay. Geez. All right. So, and, I say, of course, that's yes. And then I go back, right? But suddenly, even when I'm struggling like mad in session 11, hey, suddenly he's not contradicting me every time. He's only contradicting me every third time. You think, oh, all right then. So then I take the risk and try to do affect assembly. And oh my God, he actually sort of comes with me a little bit. And then when I say, can you see that little 11-year-old who feels these things, I expect him to say, I've told you before, this is a ridiculous thing to do. And he actually says that he can see him. And oh my God, but I only hold him there for, 3 minutes, and then I say, oh, wow, look at what you did. Wow. So it is all about pacing and tuning. It's all about attunement, tuning into your client. But, if you can't take the risk, if you don't have a map, if you don't have the ability to lead your client as well as follow, then very often you can have long sessions with clients and you don't really go to the heart of the matter. EFIT and EFT with couples is relatively short. And people say to us, how can you do these things how can you change somebody's attachment style and their relationship and the way they see themselves and their affect regulation and their depression in 20 sessions? Well, I ask myself the same thing. Okay, say, how the hell do we do that? Right. But, and how the hell do we find out 3 years later that those sessions, that's true? How do we do that? Well, it isn't, I hate to say, because we're so clever. I wish I could say, well, it's because we're all geniuses, but I don't believe that. It's because we're tapping into basic science of who we are and how we get stuck and how we grow. And we're tapping into all the ways that you can work with emotion in a very systematic way. That has to be why this is happening. But otherwise, I don't know. Maybe there's a magic word that somebody says in the middle of EFIT that I don't know what it is. But anyway, nice question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe we have time for one more, do we? Or
sure. Yeah. If only there were a single word we could all say that would.
I know. Yeah. Maybe it's something very innocuous like whatever.
Right. Zoodle, which by the way are zucchini noodles. Folks wanted you to know that zoodles are
yes.
They're zucchini noodles.
I didn't know
Oh
that.
my God, there I am thinking that they're like Cheerios. Oh, okay, all right, jolly good.
There's a lot of interest in hearing your opinion about how EFIT works in concert with other approaches. So, for instance, would you suggest that folks could integrate EFIT and IFS or EFIT and EMDR, EFIT with mindfulness? Kind of what's your sense of how EFIT can work?
Well, it depends on your style and your client. Of course, you can integrate EFIT. I don't think you could integrate EFIT with a big focus on CBT. It depends on the gap between, the approaches. That would be hard. You'd probably have to do it in sequence, but I think you can integrate. The issue is these therapies have things in common. Like most experiential therapies, AEDP, IFS, EFT, we, in this creation of dramas, really it's Gestalt. It comes from Fritz Perls. And however, the way we do it can be pretty different. The backdrop can be pretty different. Other approaches, they talk about attachment sometimes, and some approaches ignore attachment. They talk about attachment in an abstract way. I'm not sure there's another therapy that really uses attachment science the way we do and works in very specific ways that have research on those ways as we do. But, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, I like the fact that IFS seems to be naturally non-pathologizing and people actually get listened to. Whereas there's some therapies where it seems to me that people are sort of told, this is who you are. And, the therapy is actually out of a manual and from the therapist's head. It's got nothing to do with the client. So the research says that many, many clients leave after session 3. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a problem for us in psychotherapy. I also read some research the other day that there's less people coming for psychotherapy. I'm not sure that's true after COVID, but people can now look at apps and get quick solutions to complex problems. So I think there is an issue with us looking at what is relevant and what clients really respond to.
and what really makes a difference with clients. Merging it with the MDR, we don't really feel the need to do that because we have our own way of going into emotion and containing it, and we don't, I guess you could, but it seems somehow superfluous, because we go into emotion anyway, and some of the time things don't make sense to me, like the research on whether the hand movements actually, the bilateral stimulation actually makes a difference is very unclear. And so, I'm not sure about those interventions, some of them. I think the truth is that we're in love with our own model and that we keep growing it and developing it, and that's kind of the truth of it. But hey, clients are all different. We all struggle to know how to make a change. We all have different styles of working, and therapists need to find a model that gives them confidence and works for them. And sometimes they try something new. If you're going to integrate things, you have to make sure that what you're integrating fits with the model, the main model you're using.
Right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's so much more to ask you about. I know that we're out of time. There's so much more to talk about. There were so many questions here about like what it's like to be an EFIT therapist, about showing your own emotions in session, which we saw you both do. We'll have to, I guess, save that stuff for another time.
Well, I tell you what it's like to be an EFIT therapist from our point of view and from all the folks we trained. It's exhilarating. It's bloody exhilarating. Okay. Because I learn from every client I see, and it's exhilarating, which after 35 years of therapy and often working with massively distressed couples, I don't know how I feel that way, to be honest. I don't know why I'm not completely jaded, but that's the message we get from EFIT therapists. They're a passionate lot. But we've loved presenting this, and we thank you, Victoria, for your help. And I thank my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful colleague. And we've had fun. And I think it's says something about it, the fact that we always have fun at these things.
Yes.
So we hope that folks found it relevant, and we hope that they will continue to learn about EFIT and find it useful.
Thank you, Sue, Victoria, Pessy. Thanks everybody for joining us. Such a great, rich morning. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. Bye-bye now.